So I had noted on social media that no matter how much information is put out, half the country is going to believe that the White House has never been renovated before. Now, some allegedly Australian poofta suggested that I clearly wasn't motivated by the historic nature of the White Wing. I wasn't moved by it. How could I stand to see it destroyed? Which got me wondering, was the East Wing really in any way special? Oh, here I have the East Wing circled. Give you a little bit of context. Um, some people will add the section between the main house and the wings as part of the wing, but they're actually the colonnades. Okay. I knew the general timeline of White House renovations because if you're online the last week or so, there's no way you could possibly miss that information being repeated over and over again unless you willfully just didn't want to uptake it. So I'm not going to talk about the entire White House histories of renovations, but I do want to talk about the East Wing. And to the Aussie who brought this whole thing up, I would suggest you go commit bestiality with a wallaby. Now, the East Wing was built in 1902 by Teddy Roosevelt as an entrance for visitors. This served mainly as an entrance for social gatherings and when it was necessary to accommodate many cars and carriages. It was primarily a long cloakroom for coats and hats. This 1932 picture gives you an aerial view of that section there. Um, understates it compared to how many the current photos being circulated overstate it. And I'll tend to lean towards understating it just for effect. So this is the current two-story east wing as it was added to in 1942. Essentially, they added a second floor. However, the construction going on in 1942 is mostly a ruse to cover up the installation of the presidential bomb shelter. The administration didn't want Americans to realize that they thought there was a potential for the enemy to strike the U.S. East Coast. The bomb shelter wasn't purely a refuge. Early command and control communications links were added. Teddy Roosevelt's cloakroom was integrated into the East Wing and became the first family's private theater. The offices of the East Wing were initially occupied by military staff supporting the underground command center, and also the social event staff was moved in there as well. During this renovation, the colonnades, which is essentially a covered walkway that connects the East Wing to the main White House, were also heavily overhauled to match the new decor and architectural motif of the new construction. Harry Truman's administration expanded the bunker and reinforced it to withstand nuclear blasts, uh, transforming it into the modern Presidential Emergency Operations Center. During this period, social and protocol staff took over the office space vacated by the post World War II military. There was still military there, just not in the numbers they had been previously. Now, between the Truman and Ford administrations, there were the section was primarily occupied by staff handling executive support, public engagement, and event planning, and with some limited press coordination. First Lady Rosalind Carter in 1977 created the Office of the First Lady, taking over about 40% of the East Wing. In 2001, post 9/11, it was discovered that the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, a bunker, had outdated equipment and communication flaws. Essentially, for a while, when Vice President Cheney was put down there uh, to essentially take over should the president lose contact, they discovered that the center really wasn't in contact with most of the military and the rest of the world. So, following 2001, a major overhaul of the security and comms were performed. So, what about the history that occurred there? Well, I queried numerous different sources trying to come up with something of historical significance that happened there. But for the most part, everything kind of boiled down to, well, in 1948, the first movie was shown in the theater, essentially the history of the East Wing. Wow, astounding stuff, isn't it? Makes you kind of gush with pride to know that movies were shown in the East Wing and coats were hung there and people walked through it and was used as the entrance for people to get to the main party. If you think about it, can you imagine the coats that were hung in Teddy Roosevelt's cloakroom? Hmm. What movies did the first family watch in the theater? And coordinating social events. And a history that chokes you up greatly, doesn't it? So that brings us up to the Trump renovations. Now, I suspect two birds are the target of this stone. First, if we look at the East Wing facilities in terms of social events, the East Wing is rather small. It's actually rather common that for larger events, the White House sets up tents and temporary structures to accommodate all the guests. This overflow guest situation has been noted by every administration for about the past 60 to 70 years and has really been a point of contention. So, Trump stating that this has been the dream of many presidents, although they may have not been thinking exactly at the scale he was, the idea of having a bigger area for events that didn't include putting up tents probably isn't too far off the mark. Now, what also is getting very little airtime is the fact that they're also renovating the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, a bunker. Remember, this was initially installed in 1942, and they had to clear the East Wing in order to put it in the first place. It was upgraded in 1952. In 2001, it was discovered barely functional. I think there's a really good chance that the current 80-year-old structure might be inadequate for the role it's supposed to fulfill. I suspect that the state of the operation center probably necessitated a complete rebuilding of the 8 decades old underground structure. There's a real good chance that the space set up in the 1950s is probably too small to support the mission of the facility. It's also very likely that demolition of the East Wing is the only way to build this new underground facility. And to a certain extent, I think that's part of what's driving things. So, in the comments below, is this new information to you about the East Wing? Do you know about some massive historical event that somehow I missed? I'd love to hear it down there because everyone's telling me how incredibly historical this section is, and really it basically seems like a glorified entryway. Uh, what are your feelings on the whole command and control center being put in down there? Uh, is it just because everything's trashed, or maybe this is like FDR, where they're using it as an opportunity to put something in because there's some kind of imminent danger, but they don't want us to know about it. I would say less likely because it's probably going to take a while to get that in there. But yeah, food for thought. All right. Tell me what you think in the comments. Please smash the like button. Check out my other titles. You'll see I get into a lot of things. You should subscribe to get into my eclectic mix of stuff. And if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.